Welcome to Exam Night, and today we're going to be covering the university level course of Business and Consumer Ethics. This video is specifically for business and economic majors, but if you have this course in other degrees, you're welcome to join. Just a little disclaimer, your course content and syllabus might vary in depth a little bit to what we are going to cover in this video. So let's compare the two. Here is the syllabus that we are going to be covering. This is going to be broken down into two videos, and in this video, we're going to cover the introduction, problems with business ethics, common sense business ethics, consequentialist ethics, deontological duty ethics, and virtue ethics. So let's get into it. What is ethics? The term ethics may refer to the philosophical study of the concepts of moral right and wrong, and moral good and bad, to any philosophical theory of what is morally right and wrong, or morally good and bad, and to any system or code of moral rules, principles, or values. But how do we know what's right and wrong? What does right and wrong actually mean? To answer these questions about what is ethics, we introduced three main concepts. Our first concept is normativity. Normativity answers the fundamental question, what is ethics about? It concerns what we ought to do as human beings. It is about transitioning from what is to what ought to be. This involves asking what actions we should take, how we should behave, and what is expected of us, who defines these expectations, and what are the standards we follow. Ethics examines the limits of our freedom, exploring whether we have the right to make decisions about our own lives and if there are forces that compel us to act in certain ways. Understanding these constraints is crucial in the study of ethics. Concept number two is humanity. Humanity is categorized by our unique ability to reflect on our own actions. Unlike other creatures, we constantly question our existence and the choices we make. This self reflection pertains to real, tangible individuals, people like you and I, rather than abstract concepts. Understanding this is crucial because it is a recurring theme in ethical discussion. So far, we have normativity and humanity. And the third concept that ties it all together is individuality. Individuality is integral to the concept of humanity. Each person reflects uniquely, and no two individuals are identical in their questioning. So, where there's humanity, there's individuality, because every single individual, each one of us, is reflecting in our own way. And even if another person tells us something, we cannot be sure that we reflect the same way, if you know what I mean.
I know I said that there's only three terms, but I kind of lied because there's also this man, Martin Heidegger, apologies for my German, who is quite a complex character. You can go down a rabbit hole and research him for yourself, but basically, he has been heavily associated with the Nazi Party back in the day. But he did love inventing words, and two of the words we're going to dissect right now. He has invented a lot of terms, and the most prominent ones are on the screen, but the ones that we're gonna digest tomorrow are the following. Again, let's ask Google Translate. Geworfenheit Jemeinigkeit. Yeah. The first word that we're going to be dissecting is Geworfenheit, which can often be translated to throwness. This term describes the arbitrary conditions into which one is born, highlighting the fact that individuals find themselves in a world not of their own choosing. His concept highlights the passive aspect of human existence, where many aspects of our life are given to us without our consent. So, a big example of this would be how we are born into a certain family with a certain culture in a particular moment in time. Do we have control of that? Not really, at least not that we're aware of. So, Gewoffenheit is this aspect to life and to our individual experience that a lot of things are not under our control and we are kind of like dust in the wind, if you must. The second concept is mindness, and it underscores the personal, individual nature of human existence. This term signifies that each person's experience of being is unique and inherently their own. It highlights the subjective aspect of existence where each individual must control their own life choices and identity. So, what this really means is that although we can help each other experience life, we cannot really live each other's life for each other. So, mindness relates to the fact that our reflections are our own, our life is our own, and we cannot really escape that. So let's move on to obligation, ethical demand, or claim. So, what does it mean to have an ethical obligation? Is there a predetermined course of action that we must adhere to, or are there restrictions on our choices? Threefold characteristics to describe ethical demand are: Number one is the singular essence of ethical obligation. This aspect underscores the deeply personal nature of ethical decision making. Each individual faces unique circumstances and moral dilemmas, leading to a personalized reflection on what their actions to take. The ethical demand is singular because it originates from the first person perspective, focusing on the individual's own existence and choices. So, a great example of this would be in the context of climate change, individuals with different lifestyles, such as car users versus no car users, face distinct ethical obligations based on their actions. This uniqueness emphasizes that ethical responsibilities cannot be generalized or shared, but are rather intimately tied to individual circumstances. Number two is the absolute nature of ethical obligation. Here, the focus is on inherent ethical responsibility that accompanies human existence. It argues that ethical obligation is not something acquired through subsequent choices, but is intrinsic aspect of being a human. Denying this obligation would be tantamount to denying one's humanity, as ethics are deeply intertwined with our capacity for self-reflection and moral agency. So, an example of this would be life is viewed as a gift, raising questions about its origin and in depthness to it. Regardless of our beliefs about the source of our life, its inherent value necessitates a sense of responsibility towards it. This aspect emphasizes that our ethical obligations are inseparable from our existence and transcend individual preferences or circumstances. So, basically, what this entire thing is saying, which is a lot of heavy words, is that we have ethical obligation right from the moment when we are born and are able to self-reflect. So it's not something that is given to us through our own choices, but it's something that is already there and is just part of being a human. Number three would be the infinite character of ethical obligation. This aspect highlights the perpetual and evolving nature of ethical obligations. It argues that ethical responsibilities are never fully met because they are continually evolving and adapting to changing circumstances. Life itself is a journey of constant growth and self discovery, and so too is our ethical journey. So, this could also be related to the idea that life is lived forward but understood backwards. It illustrates the inherent uncertainty and complexity of existence. This perpetual state of becoming ethical goals remains elusive, defying definitive attainment. It emphasizes that ethical obligations are not finite goals that can be achieved and then set aside, but ongoing and require continual reflection and action. So, again, this talks about the fact that we kind of cannot put it all on pause and it's infinite. The ethical obligation stays with us until the time we die. So we cannot put it on pause, or let's say today I have this ethical obligation and tomorrow I do not. No, actually, you will only be able to understand your life once you have reached the very end. Until then, everything is constantly changing, growing, evolving, and that's where the infinite part comes from. So, before we move on, we need to get a few things straight. Morals, morality, and ethics. What is the difference? Let's go through the definitions. Morals, this term denotes a collective set of conduct rules, transcend individual preferences, often rooted in societal and cultural norms. It originates from a Latin word, pertains to communal behavior observed in sociology and cultural anthropology. Morality refers to an individual deliberating actions. Morality is akin to personal conscience guiding one's behavior based on internalized principles. And then we have ethics. Ethics is derived from a Greek roots, ethics involves systematic and critical reflection upon both morals and morality. It represents a high level examination of moral principles and conduct. Your examiner could be trying to trick you with the following two words, so let's pay close attention. I tried to look up the difference in pronunciation, but this is what Google comes up with. Ethos, ethos. So the way to remember is by the accents. I tried to remember the first one, ethos, with an accent pointing to the right as a little house. So ethos historically referred to a communal gathering place akin to a shelter or a residence for animals. This concept embodies the customs, habits, and rules observed within a particular group or society. So you can kind of like imagine it being a little house. And then ethos, like they're twins. Ethos pertains to introspective reflection on one's actions and choices. It delves into conscious and deliberate aspects of behavior closely aligned with personal morality. Individuals may engage in inner dialogue when deciding whether to consume meat, reflecting on their moral beliefs and values. So, a bit of a heads up, we're moving to a more exciting part of the course because before we were focusing a little more on definitions, it's a little bit dead. Now we're moving on to types of ethics and actually going to dive deeper into normative ethics as a result. Also, as I'm making this video, I try to color code a lot of things. I myself am a visual learner, so maybe it could help someone else who is also a visual learner because university presentations always tend to lack structure and color coding, and it's very hard to comprehend those things. So, right now we have non normative ethics on the left in purple, normative ethics in orange. If you have highlighters this color, I highly advise you to use them while taking the notes from this video, or at least to bring them to the exam. Put the purple one on the left, put the orange one on the right, and maybe it could help you because it certainly helps me. And yeah, let's get into it. So, the main difference normative ethics aims to establish moral norms and principles for guiding behavior, while non normative ethics focuses on understanding the nature and structure of morality without necessarily making prescriptive claims about what is right or wrong. So, on our left side, we have non normative ethics. It includes descriptive ethics and meta ethics. And on the right, we have normative ethics, which is fundamental ethics and applied ethics. Again, if you go to Google, I have noticed that there's a lot of different ways of dividing types of ethics. And because it's ethics, there's no definitive answer for anything. A lot of sources divided into three categories, some divided into two, others divided into four. So it's very important to know what type of division your professor prefers. But we're going to be dividing it into two for the easiest comprehension of this particular video. But again, please look at your syllabus and see what your professor is asking from you exactly. Because, for example, some professors might require you to divide it into three, like meta ethics, descriptive ethics, and normative ethics. So they actually divide the non normative ethics into two parts and make it three separate types of ethics. So, yeah, I'll stop yapping and let's move on. Non normative ethics operates on the level of morals within a given social context. Ethos. Again, imagine the little house being built from the left to the right. Descriptive ethics seeks to describe the prevailing customs, morals, and habits within a particular social setting without making evaluative judgments. This analysis focuses on values without prescribing norms. So, number two, under non normative ethics, we have meta ethics. It delves into philosophical reflection of ethics itself, exploring concepts beyond the physical realm. It aims at understanding the nature of morality without prescribing moral guidelines. An example would be meta ethics examines the meaning of ethical language and the underlying structure of moral discourse without making normative claims. So, under normative ethics, we have the fundamental ethics. This branch justifies the transition from descriptive to normative claims through three main traditions: Consequentialism evaluates the actions based on their consequences, prioritizes outcomes in moral judgments. Deontological ethics asserts certain acts as morality obligatory irrespective of their consequences. And virtue ethics, hold up, focuses on the moral character and integrity of individuals. All of those things over here, consequentialism, deontological ethics, and virtue ethics, we're going to be studying in a lot of detail. But just remember that it all falls under the umbrella of fundamental ethics. And then we have applied ethics, which is what actually this course is supposed to be around. Applied ethics pertains to a particular application of ethical principles to specific fields or issues such as bioethics, medical ethics, animal ethics, media ethics, business ethics, and so on and so forth. I got distracted a little, hence, this voiceover is coming 3 minutes after the other one because the word problems just reminded me of an Ariana Grande song and I had to listen to it. Anyway, problems with business ethics. Foreclosing. In an ethical context, to foreclose means to prevent or preclude certain possibilities or perspectives from consideration. Because foreclosing is going to be in every single problem over here, I really need you to remember this definition. If you need to write it down, I shall wait. Jokes, we're moving on. You can always pause it. So the six problems are on the screen, and let's move on to the first one, foreclosing philosophy. Foreclosing philosophy, 20th century philosophy, is largely excluded in business ethics. It's like a reject, which relies on three dominant streams: ancient Greek, late 18th century German, and 18th and 19th century English philosophies. Business ethics ignores or misrepresents contemporary philosophical reflections, implying they offer nothing relevant, which is quite bad, I think. Number two, foreclosing society. Business ethics often attributes corporate scandals to individual wrongdoing, emphasizing individualism. However, individual actions occur within a social context, and this individualistic approach overlooks the broader societal influences on behavior. Problem number three, foreclosing the ethical. Business ethics often limits the ethical to good and bad within businesses, ignoring broader ethical concerns about the role of business in society. This narrow focus leaves many important issues unaddressed. Why are certain topics considered to be common sense, and what is it that business ethics is leaving out? Number four is foreclosing the meaning of ethics. Business ethics frequently defines itself narrowly, but ethics encompasses a wide range of meanings. This narrow definition limits the scope of ethical discussion and understanding within the business context. Foreclosing politics. Business ethics often avoids politics, accepting the status quo and denying the role of political dynamic in ethical issues. This approach ignores how political context shapes business practices and ethical considerations. Foreclosing the goal of ethics. Business ethics tends to become instrumental, focusing on rules and guidelines rather than challenging us to think and act differently. True ethics involves understanding differences and questioning oneself, as argued by philosophers like Emmanuel Levinas and Jacques Derrida. It should not be a set of codified knowledge. Common sense business ethics for your entertainment. I even put a meme, which is very millennial of me, millennial, but I'm Gen Z, I promise. Anyway, when we talk about common sense in business ethics, we mean the usual ways most business ethicists think and work. Sometimes this common sense matches how people normally think about ethics in daily life, but other times it doesn't make much sense. To explore this, we'll begin by asking some basic questions. What is business? What is ethics? And what is business ethics? So, what is business? Originally, business meant a specific task, but now it refers to a wide range of activities, mainly in the private sector where competition is tough. The work world is divided into business sector, seen as harsh, and the non-business sector, like schools and hospitals, seen as kinder. Different ethics may apply to each. Business often has a bad image, with corporations seen as unethical, However, management roles are viewed positively, suggesting business is improving through science. But predicting human behavior and markets precisely is impossible. Claims about human nature and markets are often opinions and not facts, and that is very important to remember. Everything is an opinion. For example, beliefs like people wanting challenging jobs or customers disliking high prices shape our views on how things should be. It is important questioning those assumptions sometimes, all the time. So, what is ethics? When we label actions as good or bad, we're making strong judgments about others' behavior. These judgments often generalize behavior to persuade others to agree. Ethical common sense is shaped by who we are and where we are from, but people often assume their beliefs are universal. They forget that others might see things differently. A bigger issue is that even within the same community, people often have different beliefs. This makes it hard to apply ethics rules universally. So, what is business ethics? Business ethics is now a key part of management, emphasizing that the values and purpose of business matter. But were businesses unethical before this field existed? Business ethicists argue 3 points. First, there is a need for business ethics, otherwise, they wouldn't have a job. Number two, they have the expertise to address this need. Number three, they can achieve ethical improvements. A core belief in business ethics is that people in business are morally insufficient. This belief is often supported by claims of uh, an ethics crisis where trust businesses is low, negative media portrayals are common, and hyper competition drives harmful practices. Globalization causes belief systems clashes, and environmental concerns arise from unchecked capitalism. Business ethics argue that modern large scale anonymous corporations lack the moral responsibilities that small local businesses had. Therefore, ethics are needed to handle this, especially given increased public awareness and legislation. Business ethicists rely on two main tools: ethical knowledge from moral philosophy, citing thinkers like Plato, Aristotle, Kant, Bentham, and Mill, and the practical application of this knowledge to show its relevance and avoid accusations of irrelevance. There's skepticism whether business ethics will significantly improve business practices. Often the goals are modest reforms or moral educational for executives, avoiding radical change and focusing on tempering excess within existing structures. So, what is common sense? Common sense refers to self evident facts that don't need proof and serve as foundation of knowledge and argument. Philosophers question the validity of common sense. Kant says common sense is subjective, based on feelings rather than objective knowledge. It involves the free play of reason and imagination, claiming to know what is good, useful, and beautiful, but lacks sustained knowledge. And actually, if you think about it, some things you probably had those classmates in high school where a lot of things seem common sense to you, but they just don't seem common sense to them. And you're like, how do you not get it? Isn't this just like common sense? Aren't you supposed to know this? And especially this is evident when you move on to university and there's people who spend the past 10, 11 years in certain schools, maybe even in different countries, and you all end up in a classroom together and you understand that actually common sense is very not common and it differs greatly from person to person. But that is just my subjective opinion. But it is very important to question what is common sense, especially that we are doing business ethics where we have to question everything. J. Deleuze claims that even philosophy itself is still by no means safe from common sense, but some common sense understandings that are widely accepted among philosophers are: number one, by nature, all humans beings strive for knowledge. Number two, common sense is what we all share. Number three, thought is by nature good and is always directed towards the truth. Number four, the truth. The truth of a problem can only be found if we solve it. And number five is error is alien to thought in a sense that it must have been caused by something outside of it. Deleuze challenges this idea, suggesting that stupidity and error might be integral to thought. This perspective can be applied to business ethics, questioning whether concepts like corporate responsibilities or codes of conduct actually lead to moral improvement in organizations. It suggests that the bad and unavoidable part of ethics, and we should critically examine the true impact of business ethics. What is philosophy? A philosopher asks unique questions or re examines accepted answers. Philosophy often distinguishes between matters of fact, is statements, and matters of ought statements. Ontology studies existence, being, and reality, and is to do with the part of is. Epistemology studies the nature, origin, and limits of knowledge and refers to ought. So, this interplay raises two types of ethics: descriptive ethics and prescriptive ethics. Whoa, whoa, we're halfway there. Whoa, living on a prayer. Anyway, we're moving on, which is good for you and good for me. So, let's get on with it. We are moving to consequentialist ethics. Starting off this chapter, we're going to move into a little scene into a dating life, and we're going to think about the questions: are we good because of what we intend to do, or because of what happens as a consequence of what we did? So, let me introduce you to Ron's dilemma. Ron is the guy on the right, and he has a beautiful girlfriend named Hermione. She's the girlie in pink over here. So they're pretty much in love, and Ron has a lot of morals. He would never cheat on Hermione, and he would do everything to prevent it. And he's just very happy in his relationship. So they're living, blah, 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 everything is great. When one day, this girl comes along. Her name is Lavender, and she's like, "Hi, Ron. I would like to go out with you, break up with your girlfriend. I'm bored." And then Ron is very confused. So he says, Lavender, I'm so sorry, but that's not going to happen. I'm not breaking up with Hermione. Bye bye. So then Lavender gets very upset and she storms away, but Ron is like, yeah, whatever. I'm happy in my relationship. I'm secure. And Hermione's happy. She's like, yeah, everything is great, honey. Thank you so much. The next day, they go to the store, and out of nowhere, from the corner of the store, Lavender pops up and shoots. Pew! Now Hermione is dead. Ron is in distress and he's very confused on what is he supposed to do right now because he doesn't have a girlfriend. He has some delusional woman with a gun standing over there. And in general, he is just lost for words. So here he is sitting next to a pile of blood of his own girlfriend, which he didn't bother to clean up. But anyway, let's move on. So the question here is, what he did, was it right because of his intentions or because of the consequences of his actions? Was it still the right thing to do to say no to Lavender and carry on dating Hermione? Because he really wanted the best, but the outcome was nothing like he imagined. Consequentialist ethics focus on the outcomes of actions to determine what is right and wrong. The main idea is that the morality of an action is based on consequences. A specific form of consequentialism, known as utilitarianism, supports this idea. Utilitarianism states that actions are good if they increase the overall happiness in society. This philosophy underpins many decisions in businesses and government to maximize positive outcomes for the greatest number of people. Also, I have this love and hate relationship with this U word, so I apologize in advance with my pronunciation. No matter how much I practice, it's just not cutting it. Utilitarianism. Oh, wow, okay, it worked. So, Jeremy Bentham, who was born in 1748 and lived till 1832. Am I the only person wondering how people managed to live this long back in the day? I feel like the life expectancy in some parts of the world is still like 50 years old, and then back in the day, people are chilling and living till they're like 84 and everything is fine. I really think a lot of it is genetics. Basically, he was an English philosopher, economist, and theoretical jurist, the earliest and chief expounder of utilitarianism. If we have to summarize the next 55 slides, we should probably say it is the greatest happiness of the greatest number that is the measure of right and wrong. There's a lot of nuances with this phrase, and we're going to delve deeper into it in the following slides. So there's three generally accepted principles of utilitarianism. Number one, happiness as intrinsic value. The key idea is happiness or pleasure is the only thing that is good in itself. Contrast, this differs from instrumental value, where something is valued as a means to achieve something else. Principle number two is the right actions promote happiness. The key idea is that actions are morally right if they increase happiness and wrong if they increase unhappiness. The controversy with this is that this principle judges actions by their outcomes, not by the intentions behind them. Critics argue that intentions should also matter in judging morality. For example, let's go back to Ron and Hermione, right? Right actions promote happiness. What is the problem with this statement? Is the fact that Ron wanted the best. He wanted was not to cheat on his lovely girlfriend, and something that ended up happening is he got her killed. Well, not he got her killed, but Lavender got her killed, but she's dead. It doesn't matter. So, can we challenge this phrase? Absolutely. Do right actions actually promote happiness? And that is basically the controversy behind it. Equality of happiness. The key idea is that everyone's happiness is equally important. The historical context behind this is a progressive idea in Bentham's time, challenging the belief that the happiness of certain people was more important than others. The implication is that the government should create policies that bring people happiness equally, not just the privileged part. The golden rule of utilitarianism, as articulated by Hutcheson, states that the best action is the one that brings the most happiness to the greatest number of people. Bentham linked this principle to spreading jam, aiming to maximize utility or happiness for society. He proposed the concept of philosophic, philosophic, philosophic calculus to measure the pleasure quantitatively, considering factors like intensity, duration, certainty, and extent of pleasure. To be included in this calculations are several variables of vectors which Bentham called circumstances. These are intensity, so how strong is the pleasure? Number two is duration, how long will the pleasure last? Number three, certainty or uncertainty, how likely or unlikely is that the pleasure will occur? Number four is propinquity or remoteness, how soon will the pleasure occur? Um, this slide is just challenging me with pronunciation right now. Fecundity, fecundity, fecundity. I do not think there's another way of pronouncing this word. But anyway, the probability that the action will be followed by sensations of the same kind. Purity, the probability that it will not be followed by sensations of the opposite kind. And extent, how many people will be affected. So, refining utilitarianism. John Stuart Mill is the second prominent figure in this entire philosophy. So, we have Jeremy Bentham and we have John Stuart Mill. He was born in 1806 and died in 1873. Oh, he had a shorter lifespan. Anyway, he was an English philosopher, economist, and advocate of utilitarianism. He was influenced during the Reformist 19th century and is remembered for his work in logic and ethics. While Bentham was seen as a more direct radical, whereas Mill projected a more refined and elitist image, Mill expressed doubts about what seemed like a modern trend to oversimplification along the general public. While he tempered and introduced a humane aspect to Bentham's strict policies, he also guided Bentham's radicalism towards a somewhat conservative position in certain aspects. In rule utilitarianism, pleasures are ranked based on their importance, a concept introduced by Mill. Utilitarianism is pivotal in large-scale administration and 20th century business practices. Interestingly, maximizing happiness requires calmly assessing potential outcomes, avoiding emotional appeals. Utilitarianism is a rational approach that evaluates actions based on their contribution to the greater good, prioritizing happiness over personal interests. There are two main types: rule and act. Rule emphasizes following rules that generally lead to greatest good for the greatest amount of people, and it is usually associated with Stuart Mill. And there's act, on the other hand, focusing on assessing each situation individually without relying on fixed rules. Instead, it adapts to circumstances to maximize utility. And that is usually associated with Jeremy Bentham. While both forms aim to promote happiness, they may result in different courses of action. There are a few critiques of this approach, and as you can see on the screen, there's four main aspects to it. The critiques of utilitarianism are pretty straightforward, and one of the basics one is understanding the good. Although this philosophy focuses on maximizing happiness, defining good is tricky because it varies from person to person. Preferences play a big role, but it's hard to know all preferences and prioritize them. A lot of people don't even know what they want themselves. So, how are we supposed to know what they want and also manage to maximize it and give the greatest good for the greatest number? So, you see, for example, if there's a person who has eaten apples their entire life, and don't know about the existence of mangoes, because mangoes are obviously better than apples. Fight me. It would be very hard for us to know what actually would be the maximum utility. Another difficulty comes about with measuring happiness. Calculating what's good involves weighing different forms of happiness, but pleasures and pains aren't always comparable. Utilitarianism may struggle when many people want something morally questionable. The third challenge is information challenges. Gathering complete, reliable information about consequences is tough, especially when considering future outcomes. We can't always predict the future accurately, leading to uncertainty in decision making. For example, the example that we have provided with Ron and Hermione and Lavender, who could have thought that this delusional woman would have killed Hermione? We had no clue. So by Ron rejecting her, it's not always predictable what that person is going to do. Maybe she could have done something to herself. Maybe everything would have been fine. So it's very hard to predict the consequences, especially that we can't dive into each other's minds. The fourth challenge is political arithmetic. This idea aims to solve social problems using numerical methods, assuming that human factors like emotion can't be replaced by numbers. It's about finding common ground for different parties to communicate effectively. Now we're moving on to second last chapter in this video. You can pat yourself on the shoulder, you got this far. And right now we're going to be talking about deontological or duty ethics, which are synonyms. In philosophy, deontological ethics are ethical theories that highlight the connection between duty and the morality of human action. The term deontology originates from the Greek words deon, meaning duty, and logos, meaning science. And this is when we get introduced to Immanuel Kant, a German philosopher born in 1724 in Prussia at the time, made significant contribution to epistemology, ethics, aesthetics. His work influenced Kantianism and idealism in philosophy. So, Kant is actually famous for his duty based ethics, which are based on the idea of categorical imperative, which highlights universal ethical norms, encouraging individuals to always respect the humanity of others and follow rules that apply universally. The human element is crucial in this ethical framework, combining realism and idealism in philosophical thought. He believed that humans shape reality through their thoughts, known as transcendental idealism. He thought ethics should be based on reason, not emotions, saying actions should be universal laws. This means we should act morally regardless of personal desires. His ideas emphasize duty and rationality in making ethical decisions. Because Kant is such a prominent figure in philosophy, you have a lot of philosophers and ethicists that try to apply his thoughts and ideology to different areas in human life. And right now, we're going to be talking about one of those people, and that is Norman E. Bowie. He is a well known figure in business ethics and applies Kant's ideas to business practices. So, his view on Kant might differ from yours, mine, or your professor's. This is merely an opinion, but it is his perception of his ideas. So Kant believed that highest good is acting out of sense of duty, which is known as goodwill. According to Kant, what makes an action good is not its consequences, but whether or not it's done out of duty. Bowie explains two types of duties from Kant's work: hypothetical imperatives and categorical imperatives. Hypothetical imperatives are conditional. If you want to succeed, you must work hard. Categorical imperatives are unconditional. You must always tell the truth. Bowie presents three rules from Kant for categorical imperatives. So the three rules for the type of imperatives that are unconditional, right? So you must always tell the truth. Let's relate the first one to this. For example, only do actions that you will want to become a universal rule for everyone. So if you don't want anybody else to lie, you shouldn't lie yourself. And if you do something, for example, you don't sort out your trash, or I don't know, you beat someone up at the bar, then you should be prepared that that could be a universal law for everyone. So, unless you wanted to become such, you should not be doing it. Number two, treat every person as valuable in themselves and not just means for your own purpose. So, every person should be valuable by who they are rather than by what they can get you. And number three, act as if you live in an ideal society where you're both the ruler and the ruled. So, pretend that you live in an ideal world. How would you want everyone, including yourself, to behave? Bowie suggests using these rules to test if a business action is moral. For example, lying is generally wrong because you wouldn't want everyone else to lie to you. Bowie admits that some business practices, like firing employees, seem to go against Kantian ethics. However, he argues that if the employer relationship is honest and fair, then layoffs can be morally acceptable. He points out that some business practices, like promoting diversity and environmental responsibility, align with Kantian ethics because they respect human dignity and rationality. However, treating employees just as resources for profit, as often happens in capitalist world, can be problematic because it can undermine their autonomy and dignity. Bowie believes that businesses following Kantian principles, acting out of duty, respecting human dignity, and treating people as ends in themselves can positively impact the world and contribute to the global peace. However, there are concerns whether Kant himself would agree. Kant emphasized recent social and political discourse for achieving world peace rather than relying on ethical business practices alone. This raises questions about whether Kant would share Bowie's optimism regarding the role of businesses in promoting global harmony. In the Critique of Practical Reason, Kant explores what would happen if people could achieve a completely rational and rule based morality. He argues that while people might act correctly, they wouldn't be doing so out of ethical duty. Instead, their actions would be driven by external factors such as fear of punishment or hope for reward, rather than internal moral commitment. He believed that true moral strength comes from overcoming inner struggles, not following rules to avoid consequences. Actions performed to avoid punishment lack moral value. He worries that some his ethics might lead people to act out of duty for the wrong reasons, like external commands, rather than genuine moral conviction. In the metaphysics of morals, Kant distinguishes law from morality. Law deals with external rules and enforcement, while morality focuses on internal motives. True freedom involves acting on inner motives rather than external pressures. And here's a question for you. If you are a religious person, do you think Kant would approve you acting out of the fact that you know that you will go to heaven for a certain action? That is some food for thought. He also emphasizes the importance of self knowledge for ethical behavior, acknowledging that fully understanding one's motive is extremely difficult. This ongoing self examination is crucial for developing moral strength and maintaining human dignity. In other words, you really have to try to find out your inner motives, and although it can be very hard, you always have to seek to understand yourself further. I'm not going to read all of this out loud, but here's some quotes and where they sourced from. So you could use them in your exam and essay based questions. You're welcome. Another thing that Kant's ethics address is a big gap between how things are and how we want them to be. He says humans have goals and intentions, but the world is messy and doesn't always match. Kant warns against trying to explain everything with divine plans or human nature because it goes beyond what we can understand. Instead, he says we should accept that our thinking has limits and our world is imperfect. Also, he separates happiness, which he sees as continuous contentment for rational beings, from being virtuous, which means sticking to moral rules even when it's hard. He criticizes the idea that happiness comes from pleasure or stuff, saying true moral action needs independence and isn't about feeling good. Kant believed that the real freedom comes from not knowing everything and not being controlled by consequences. So he says being good means doing it just because it's right, not because you expect something in return. Actually, this came up as one of the main exam questions last year at my university, where there was a quote by Kant, and you were supposed to explain as to why doing something because you have to is not morally correct, or when there is a reward involved. So if I were you, I would focus on this quite a bit, because sometimes professors like to give you quotes and for you to elaborate further on them with a reflection on the ideologies of this philosopher, for example. So, yes, and the quotes before should really help you in that. We can't conclude. Jokes we can and we will, and sometimes I feel like a millennial with those jokes, but I am a Gen Z, I promise. So let's move on. So if I had to summarize this chapter, this is how I would do it. Kant suggests that while virtue may relate to happiness, it shouldn't be our primary motivation. Morality isn't about ensuring happiness, but about becoming worthy of it. Happiness is beyond our control, but we can control our intentions to do good. Kant emphasizes the ongoing struggle for moral goodness despite our limitations. He also focuses on understanding the essence of ethics, freedom, and the constant challenge of being moral. He urges introspection rather than blind adherence to external rules. Business ethics can benefit from a deeper understanding of Kant's philosophy, embracing the complexities of moral decision making, rather than seeking simplistic rules. So we're moving on to the last chapter, which is virtue ethics. And if you stayed this long, congratulations to you. Um, let's get on with it. Virtue ethics. In the realm of ethical theories, discussions have often revolved around pleasure, consequences, and intentions, as advocated by philosophers like Bentham, Mill, and Kant. However, there exists a rich tapestry of moral language beyond these frameworks, encompassing virtues like courage, honesty, and wisdom. These virtues are deeply ingrained in everyday discourse, reflecting the character of individuals and societies. This introduces us to the concept of virtue ethics, a philosophical approach that places a strong emphasis on character and cultivation of virtuous traits. The roots of virtue ethics can be traced back to ancient Greek philosophy, notably Aristotle, who emphasized the importance of character and virtuous living. Aristotle's insights laid the foundation for understanding how different societies prioritize and cultivate specific virtues reflecting their distinct values and priorities. This understanding extends beyond individuals to encompass organizations, suggesting that businesses and institutions may also embody distinct character, traits, or virtues. As contemporary scholars like Robert Solomon have argued, virtue ethics offers a compelling framework for addressing ethical dilemmas in various domains, including business ethics. However, applying virtue ethics to business practices presents on its own challenges, including questions about the nature of organizations as community and the feasibility of prioritizing ethical values over profit. Despite these challenges, exploring virtue ethics in the context of business ethics opens the new avenues for understanding ethical decision making and fostering a more ethically conscious corporate culture. Business is often seen as focused solely on making money and competing fiercely, but values also matter in business. Business people have their own sense of right and wrong, even if it differs from personal beliefs. Robert Solomon believes that businesses can function like communities where virtues like integrity and loyalty are valued. Virtues such as honesty and perseverance are essential for businesses to thrive, according to Solomon. His ideas prompt important questions about ethics in business and the possibility of creating truly ethical communities within organizations. Aristotle, a student of Plato and later mentor to Alexander the Great, is known for his empirical approach and contribution to biology, politics, and social theory. In his theory, he systematically outlined virtues building upon Plato's concept of four cardinal virtues: wisdom, courage, moderation, and justice. Aristotle's ethics were embedded in the ancient Greek worldview and the theory of entelechy, emphasizing fulfilling one's purpose, telos, within nature. I really hope your exam is not oral because my pronunciation of certain words is absolutely ridiculous, but we will get through it. Humans, as rational and social animals, strive for understanding and excellence, according to reason, leading to eudaimonia and flourishing. So, what is virtue? Virtue, according to Aristotle, is doing the right thing at the right time, in the right way, and in the right amount towards the right people. Yeah, anyway, virtue entails having good judgment, understanding how to handle oneself, and interacting effectively with others. It is viewed as a set of robust character traits that lead to predictably good behavior, representing a midpoint between extremes known as the golden mean. So, if I had to explain the golden mean, Crash Course has a great part on Aristotle. Not like I'm sending you away from this channel, but for example, the golden mean would be somewhere between being a coward and being completely reckless, or being completely selfless or completely selfish. So the golden mean is always a balance between the two extremes, usually characteristics. So that's how we should view it. Aristotle believed that all virtues operate similarly, representing a balance between extremes. Virtues like honesty and generosity also follow the golden mean, avoiding excess and deficiency. Virtue is seen as a skill developed through habituation and practical wisdom learned from moral exemplars. Virtue theory emphasizes striving for eudaimonia, or a life well lived. It is characterized by continuous improvement and striving for excellence. Eudaimonia involves facing challenges and finding satisfaction in accomplishments, pushing oneself to be the best version of oneself. Virtuous individuals are those who pursue eudaimonia, are inclined to do good things as a result. If you think about it, eudaimonia would make a really great tattoo. It's just like, it's deep, you know? Aristotle, despite being an outsider in Athens, delved into questions about human togetherness and ethics. Aristotle's concept of friendship or philia goes beyond warm feelings to include trust, mutual goodwill, and even self care. Friendship, according to Aristotle, involves risk, tension, and requires effort to cultivate. Perfect friendship, where both friends trust each other completely and treat each other as they would themselves, is rare and is difficult to achieve. He distinguishes perfect friendship from more practical, instrumental friendships, based on pleasure or utility. This idea has challenged contemporary notions of friendship and community, emphasizing the complexity and effort required to build genuine friendships. Application of Aristotle and virtue ethics in business. Applying virtue ethics in business faces challenges related to the nature of organizations as communities and the practical advice provided by Aristotle. Aristotle's view of community differs from modern conceptions, focusing on complexities and political tensions rather than warmth and closeness. While businesses exhibit tensions in politics, Aristotle warns against equating business relationship with friendships or communities. Businesses aim primary for profit, unlike the pursuit of happiness and a good life in friendships and communities. Contemporary theorists like Alistair MacIntyre argue that managers driven by efficiency and manipulation could not embody Aristotelian virtue genuinely. Solomon's optimistic view of integrating Aristotelian virtues into businesses overlooks the inherent challenges within organizational structure in capitalist markets. Here are some critiques and insights from virtue ethics. Virtue ethics acknowledges the influence of social context on morality, emphasizing understanding what is considered good in different contexts. However, the application of virtue ethics in business often overlooks this central insight, offering generic moral prescriptions without considering the business context. The specificity of virtue ethics raises questions about moral relativism and the diversity of ethical systems across cultures. If you have reached this point, I congratulate you sincerely because you have stamina and we are a new channel. So if you would like to support us, please like and subscribe and leave a comment or any remarks on what we can improve in order to make our videos better and more resourceful for you. Thank you and good luck. Go to part 2.